everyone. So a question that a lot of students ask in the sewing school is there a correct way to pin fabric? The short answer is no. You can pin however you like, but I just thought I'd show you a few ways how I teach people to pin onto some pieces of cotton here, and then you just need to decide which style of pinning you like best. I generally just say to people, whatever you're most comfortable with, do that one, because don't get yourself overwhelmed by the right or wrong ways to pin things together. Pins are there to just hold your fabric together. Okay, so the first technique is probably the most common. So I've got two raw edges of fabric lined up along this top edge, and I have my first pin here. And basically, you're just going to put your pins running parallel to the raw edges like that. So I would basically pin them in a line like this, as long as they're sort of in a line running alongside a raw edge. Now, the reason why we pin slightly closer to the raw edge is just for ease. One, you're concentrating in this area, so if this was under my sewing machine like this, and you were sewing down this side here, it would be closer to this edge. One, to remind you which side you're joining, which is always important, and two, so that you're only concentrating in this sort of area, so you're not concentrating on anything over here or like worrying about too much at the same time. And also to note that I always put the head of the pins coming towards me, because if I'm pinning parallel to the seams like this, I want to be able to easily pull my pins out towards me as it's going through the machine this way. So that takes a little bit of practice of which way you put your pins around. But if you imagine, as you're putting it under the sewing machine, your foot is going to run along here and the majority of the fabric is going to be out to your left. So you basically want to put your pins with the head of the pins always pointing towards you, so you can pull them out towards you. If you put them this way, what's going to happen is your foot's going to get to here, and then you're going to have to clamber underneath to pull them out backwards. So it's always easier to put them in this way so they're easier to pull out. And not only that, but you can get quite close to the sort of like body of your pin before you can start sliding it out, and you shouldn't have to raise the foot if you time it well. Now, if you struggle to pin anyway, one technique that I teach is to poke the pin through your fabric, and you shouldn't really have to lift it up. If you've got a hard surface underneath your fabric, you should sort of be able to like poke it through and then slide it along the table underneath. So you're basically doing that, but because it's on a hard surface, it sort of just glides along the bottom. If you're on a smooth surface or you pin on your carpet, this technique will be slightly harder for you, which is why it is always easier to pin on a hard surface. So you poke the pin in, slide it along the hard surface underneath, and then if you want to keep your fabric nice and flat, a lot of people sort of pin like this and then they lift it up and they try and sort of like angle it round, but you're wrinkling and moving the fabric quite a lot. So if you want to, you've got your fabric exactly where you need it, this technique works better because I'm not lifting up the fabric too much. I'm just sliding the pin through. And then what you do is gently run your finger along the pin underneath the fabric, and you can feel where the point is. I want you to go beyond that with your finger and push down on the fabric with this finger, and then lift up the pin so that you're sort of like lifting the fabric slightly, and then you're pushing it forwards towards your finger, and then it should poke out the fabric. So again, I've slid my finger along the pin and found where the end is. I'm going to go beyond that, press hard down on my fabric, lift up the fabric with my pin, and then push it forward, and it should just slide out of the fabric and pop out there. Okay, so the second way to pin your fabric is basically at a right angle to your edge. So you'll see this a lot when people are sewing with jersey, but you're essentially going to pin this way. Now, whether you're right or left-handed, you can decide whether you want the head of your pin on the outside of your fabric or the inside of your fabric. Essentially, I always put the heads of my pins coming outside the fabric, because again, if I turn this round, this is where I'm going to sew down, And because I'm right-handed, as I sew, I sort of steer with my left hand mostly, and then I can pull the pins out as I go along with my right hand. Now I am going to say something now about pinning this way, which is the reason why I mostly pin this way. You can basically sew over your pins if you pin in this direction. Not lots of people like to do this because obviously there is a chance that you could hit a pin. But if your stitch length is, not too small, you should be able to sort of hop over your pins. But it is sort of essential for you to try and pin them at a dead-on right angle to your selvage edge or the seam that you're joining, just to give your machine a chance to actually hop over that pin. If you are worried about that, then of course just take your pins out as you go like you would normally. But you can leave them in for as long as possible. So if I am sewing with silky fabrics, slippery viscoses that are difficult to manage, or jerseys, this way of pinning your fabric not only means that you can leave your pins in for as long as possible, it also means that your fabric doesn't slide up and down your fabric this way as you're sewing. It sort of keeps it nice and still. So I tend to find that this holds fabric edges together much better. But again, as an extra benefit, you can leave them in if you want to. My mum, Ali, hates me doing this because she hates hearing a needle hit a pin. Yes, there is a chance that will happen. Worst case scenario, you break your needle and you just have to replace it. But I have to say I always pin like this and I hardly ever hit my pin. And you're more likely to hit a pin if it's bent. So just try and look after your pins, keep them nice and straight, and pin in this direction if you want to. I really hope you found this video useful. I just thought it was like quite a fun little tip about pinning, and it's something that a lot of the students ask a lot in the sewing school. So comment below if you found this useful, give this video a thumbs up if you can, and I will see you again for another video. Happy handmade, everyone!